Well, thank you everybody for coming. What we're going to be talking about is your experience or experiences you've heard about for the emotional and mental reactions people have had to both October the 7th attacks and also the subsequent war, and then the increase in anti-Semitic incidents that have been happening in the community.
I think there was an element of paranoia as well. You know, should I keep on, you know, my Magen David? You know, some people were worried about that. And should I have the mezuzah on the door? Right. I personally actually thought that was a good thing to do. And I've got an incident where I was working as a therapist and the door opened and another therapist came in and I'm wearing my Magen David and he said, "I'm pleased you're wearing it, I'm Jewish too, that you're proud of it." And I said, "Yes, I'm proud of wearing that."
The trust that, you know, in human beings had gone, and people found it very difficult to suss out, where they soon found out, of course, among their friends, for instance, who was on their side and who was not. And I heard a lot from my clients about friendships that had been long-standing, that suddenly, you know, they felt so uncomfortable and they actually broke up with those friends and they formed a new circle of friends that felt safe.
I feel that a lot of people are actually coming out and showing that they are Jewish now. More people than ever have sort of said they are proud of it as well, though, because they feel this sense of community that is a comfort to them.
I've definitely found that and found comfort in being in communal spaces and where it's specifically about talking about what's going on, or whether it's just a communal space about something else, you know, in a religious environment or otherwise. But actually, I think the first time I really got an opportunity to just download and talk with friends and family was at a pub quiz with some friends, and we weren't there to talk about it, but we stayed for probably 2 hours afterwards, just letting off steam. And it was the first time we'd been out in public, but able to kind of talk frankly with each other, and it felt such a great comfort, really. Yeah, that was really important.
We're particularly interested to hear what it's like being a Londoner during the last few months and how it's been, perhaps if you work in London or, you know, socialise in London. I'm guessing the pub quiz was in London. You know, what's it like to be a Jewish person in the London community over the last few months?
I think it depends whether you actually venture out on a Saturday into town. I do, but I haven't recently. I've not wanted to go into town because of all the marches. I do feel unsettled. I wouldn't say it stopped me, it just makes me think, if I can go a different place or I avoid it, whereas before I would have happily gone into town. And I think it's the same for a lot of my friends as well.
I think that, you know, in the few days after October the 7th, before there'd really been any response, you were already seeing, someone mentioned that you mentioned the bridge being defaced and shops around here being broken into, and it did feel quite scary, and I think it's felt in previous times when anything kicks off in the Middle East that British Jews feel the impact because of a huge spike in antisemitism.
I run groups for children of Holocaust survivors and refugees, so the second generation, and they were very alarmed by what has happened because some of them were really not interested in their parents' past, and suddenly they realized it could happen to them, and the little their parents told them, suddenly they wished they had listened more.
That anxiety is almost contagious between people. You know, if my anxiety goes up and I'm having a conversation with you, it's likely your anxiety will go up, and it became a kind of chain reaction. What have you been doing to, you know, look after yourselves?
I think the important thing, I'm working trauma, is not to expose yourself to the news too too many times a day. I put a parallel to this with COVID actually, when you're looking at how many deaths there were a day. And in the early days, the anxiety was right up there.
Yes.
One of the things we've been talking about is how do you, maybe I'll get interested to hear your views, I mean, how do you get to talk to people when, yes, there's a shared experience of what happened in Israel and also the anti-Semitism, the rise of the spike, as you called it.
Yeah, I think that coming together informally or formally in person rather than online creates the safest space to have those conversations and find people with the same values, but have a more cordial conversation with someone who might have a slightly different view to yourself. I've never ever found an online conversation like that. I was working in the borough of Barnet with all the different communities. They brought together people from different religions. So they brought together Jewish colleagues and friends, and there were lots of speakers. And you know, I didn't agree politically with everything that everyone said, but the main thing that happened there was that we were all in the same space physically to say, you know what, we're not going to agree on everything, but it's important that we try and get on. It was so brave of them to try and do that. I found that quite a remarkable thing.
But I think that story you've just told is very powerful and is quite symbolic of London trying to heal itself during a very difficult time for many communities. And the fact that everybody there was able to come, you know, with their differing emotional responses, psychological responses, some will have been similar, some would be different, and all the differences they held. But as you say, to be physically present, to be together in one space and to be able to tolerate those differences, to me, that's kind of what being a Londoner is all about, really. During such a difficult, delicate time, for everybody to be able to do that is quite remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's important not to also isolate ourselves as a community. We are Londoners with a multicultural, and to not separate ourselves too much.
So I'm wondering how things have changed over time. How do you feel that things have moved on now that the war's been happening quite a long time, that it's in the news all the time? It's not gone away from the news. Okay, it goes up and down, but it's basically always there. What about your general reactions and what you've noticed in the communities you're part of?
You're stuck in like a time bubble or something, want to get on, and you are getting on with daily lives and doing your routine things, but knowing that everything is still happening behind you. So it's hard to sort of move past it, despite wanting to.
I suppose people have learned new coping strategies. You know, they've had to do something in order to function.
The expectation that mainstream British Jewry thinks one way and everyone else thinks another way. And I found that quite difficult to navigate. And then I try and reflect back about what's happening in Israel at the moment. And you know, it's a vibrant democracy. It's with a huge swathe of different political opinions. And so I find that quite difficult sometimes when talking to people that don't necessarily know so much about the situation there.
Maybe a little bit more from you about your experience and being with friends and being at work.
Just thinking about things in recent weeks that have made me feel hopeful, connecting with my Jewish friends and family and having conversations, having disagreements about things, but you know what, we're having the conversation. And then also at work, just connecting with people of all different faiths and religions. And I also feel a responsibility to share and educate and kind of talk about, you know, it's kind of what you were saying. We have to go out and share how we're feeling.
Well, that's a really great note to leave the conversation on. So thank you all so much for your participation.